The village of Kukurantumi lay shrouded in an eternal twilight, as if the sun never quite rose above the horizon. The air was heavy with the scent of blooming flowers and the distant tang of decay. It was a place where the living and the dead coexisted in an uneasy harmony. Akua, a skilled braider, sat in her small hut, surrounded by the whispers of the village. Her hands moved with a life of their own, weaving intricate patterns into the hair of her clients. But Akua's heart was not in her work. Her mind was consumed by the memory of her daughter, Amma, who had passed away just a few moons ago. Amma's death had left a gaping hole in Akua's life, and the village's incompetent healer, Kofi, was to blame. His negligence had cost Amma her life, and Akua's grief had curdled into a deep-seated anger. She couldn't shake the feeling that the village was responsible for her daughter's death, and that they needed to be punished. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the village in an eerie darkness, Akua's hands began to move with a newfound purpose. She started to braid a strange, twisted pattern, one that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. "What are you doing, Akua?" her apprentice, Afua, asked, her voice trembling with unease. Akua's eyes glinted in the fading light. "I'm just starting, my dear," she whispered, her voice dripping with malice. "I'm just starting." And with that, Akua's braids became imbued with a dark and sinister power, one that would change the village of Kukurantumi forever. As the days passed, Akua's braids became more intricate, more beautiful, and more sinister. She wove dark magic into every strand, whispering curses and incantations as she worked. Her clients began to notice a change in themselves, a growing sense of unease and dread. Afua, Akua's apprentice, was the first to suspect that something was wrong. She would catch glimpses of Akua's braids seeming to move of their own accord, like living serpents, and the villagers who wore Akua's braids would often report strange and terrifying occurrences, vivid nightmares, unexplained illnesses, and accidents that seemed to come from nowhere. But Akua just smiled and nodded, her eyes glinting with a malevolent light. She knew that her braids were working, that they were spreading darkness and fear throughout the village. One day, the village elder's wife, Ya, came to Akua for a braid. Ya was a proud and arrogant woman, always looking down on those she considered beneath her. Akua saw an opportunity to teach Ya a lesson, and she wove a particularly potent curse into the braids. As Ya wore the braid, she began to experience strange and terrifying visions. She would see snakes slithering through her bed, and hear the sound of children crying in the night. And when she looked in the mirror, she would see a face that was not her own, a face twisted and corrupted by some dark and malevolent force. Ya tried to remove the braid, but it seemed to be stuck to her head, as if it had become a part of her. And Akua just laughed, her eyes glinting with triumph. "You should have thought of that before you came to me," Akua said, her voice dripping with malice. "Now, you'll wear my braid forever." And with that, Ya's descent into madness began. She would wander the village, screaming and crying, with Akua's braid still stuck to her head, and the villagers would whisper and point, knowing that Akua's braids were cursed, and that anyone who wore them would be forever changed. As Ya's madness deepened, the villagers began to experience strange and terrifying occurrences. They would wake up in the middle of the night, hearing the sound of whispers and footsteps outside their windows. And when they looked out, they would see shadowy figures lurking in the darkness. The villagers tried to stay indoors, but the nightmares followed them even into their dreams. They would dream of snakes and spiders, of dark forests and abandoned villages. And when they woke up, they would feel a creeping sense of dread, as if something was watching them from the shadows. Akua's braids seemed to be spreading darkness and fear throughout the village, and Akua herself seemed to be growing stronger, her eyes glinting with an otherworldly power. One night, a group of villagers decided to confront Akua, to demand that she stop weaving her cursed braids. But when they arrived at her hut, they found her surrounded by a halo of candlelight, her eyes blazing with an unnatural intensity. "You should not have come here," Akua hissed, her voice like a snake slithering through the grass. "Now, you will never leave." And with that, Akua began to braid, her fingers moving with a speed and dexterity that was almost supernatural. The villagers tried to run, but their feet seemed rooted to the spot, and as Akua's braids wrapped around them, they felt a creeping sense of darkness. as if they were being pulled down into some deep and ancient abyss. The next morning, the villagers were found, their bodies twisted and contorted, their faces frozen in screams of terror. And Akua was nowhere to be found, her hut empty and silent, except for the sound of whispers and laughter, echoing through the darkness. The villagers were shocked and terrified by the discovery of the twisted bodies. They knew that Akua's braids were cursed, but they had never suspected that she was capable of such evil. A group of brave villagers decided to search for Akua, to confront her and put an end to her reign of terror. They searched the village, the surrounding forests, and even the nearby river, but there was no sign of Akua. As the sun began to set, the villagers gathered in the town square, unsure of what to do next. Some wanted to burn Akua's hut to the ground, while others wanted to perform a ritual to cleanse the village of Akua's evil. But as they argued, a strange noise echoed through the village. It sounded like the rustling of leaves, followed by the soft whispering of voices. The villagers fell silent, listening to the noise. And then, they saw her. Akua emerged from the shadows, her eyes blazing with an otherworldly intensity. "I have been waiting for you," Akua hissed, her voice like a snake slithering through the grass. "You should not have come looking for me." And with that, Akua began to braid, her fingers moving with a speed and dexterity that was almost supernatural. The villagers tried to run, but their feet seemed rooted to the spot. And as Akua's braids wrapped around them, they felt a creeping sense of darkness, as if they were being pulled down into some deep and ancient abyss. The villagers were never seen again, and the village was left to face the wrath of Akua's cursed braids alone. As the days passed, the villagers who had encountered Akua began to fall ill. They would experience vivid nightmares and wake up with an intense feeling of dread. Some reported seeing shadowy figures lurking in the corners of their homes, while others heard whispers in their ears when they were alone. The villagers were terrified, and they didn't know what to do. They tried to stay indoors, but the curse seemed to follow them everywhere. Some even reported finding strange, twisted braids on their doorsteps, as if Akua was taunting them. One of the villagers, a young girl named Afua, decided to seek out the help of a local priestess. The priestess, known for her knowledge of the ancient arts, listened to Afua's story and nodded gravely. "I know of Akua's curse," the priestess said. "It is an ancient and powerful magic, one that can only be broken by finding the source of Akua's pain." Afua was determined to find the source of Akua's pain, and she set out on a journey to uncover the truth. She spoke to the villagers, gathering stories and clues, and she began to piece together the events that had led to Akua's descent into madness. But as Afua delved deeper into the mystery, she realized that she was being watched. Akua's eyes seemed to be everywhere, following her every move. And Afua knew that she was running out of time. Afua's search for the truth led her to a small, secluded hut on the outskirts of the village. The hut belonged to an elderly woman named Nana, who was known for her wisdom and knowledge of the village's history. Nana welcomed Afua warmly and listened intently as she told her story. When Afua finished, Nana nodded thoughtfully and began to speak. "Akua's pain is rooted in her past," Nana said. Her daughter, Alma, was not just any child. She was a bright and curious girl, loved by all who knew her. But Akua's husband, Kwame, was a cruel and abusive man. He resented Alma's birth and took out his anger on Akua. Afua's eyes widened in shock as Nana continued. One day, Kwame's abuse went too far. Akua, desperate to protect herself and Alma, turned to dark magic. She made a pact with a malevolent spirit, trading her soul for the power to defend herself and her daughter. Afua felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the true extent of Akua's pain. But the spirit's power came at a terrible cost, Nana said. Alma's life was cut short, and Akua was consumed by grief and anger. She has been seeking revenge ever since, using her braids to spread darkness and fear throughout the village. Afua knew that she had to act fast to break the curse. But as she turned to leave, she felt a presence behind her. She turned to see Akua standing in the doorway, her eyes blazing with fury. Afua stood frozen in terror as Akua's eyes bore into her soul. She knew that she had to act fast, or risk becoming the next victim of Akua's curse. "Akua, please," Afua said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm trying to help you. I want to break the curse and free you from your pain." Akua's expression didn't change, but Afua saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. For a moment, Afua thought she saw a glimmer of the person Akua once was, before the curse consumed her. But then, Akua's face hardened again, and she began to laugh. It was a cold, mirthless sound, and it sent shivers down Afua's spine. You think you can help me? Akua spat. You think you can break the curse? I am the one who has been wronged, Afua. I am the one who has been hurt, and I will not be silenced. Afua knew that she had to think fast. She remembered the words of Nana, the elderly woman who had told her the story of Akua's past. Nana had said that the curse could only be broken by finding the source of Akua's pain. Akua, listen to me, Afua said, trying to keep her voice calm. I know what happened to you. I know about Kwame and about Amma, and I know that you're not beyond redemption. Akua's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Afua thought she saw a glimmer of hope. But then, Akua's face twisted into a snarl, and she reached out to grab Afua. Afua tried to defend herself, but Akua's grip was like a vice. She felt herself being pulled into a dark and foreboding world. A world where the laws of reality no longer applied. As Akua's hands closed around her wrists, Afua felt a searing pain, like her skin was being burned by an invisible fire. She tried to scream, but her voice was muffled by some unseen force. Akua's eyes seemed to bore into her soul, filled with a malevolent intensity that made Afua's blood run cold. She felt herself being pulled into a vortex of darkness, a whirlpool of evil that threatened to consume her entirely. And then, everything went black. When Afua came to, she found herself in a strange, twisted version of the village. The huts seemed to loom over her, their thatched roofs reaching out like skeletal fingers. Akua stood over her, her eyes blazing with an otherworldly power. Welcome to my world, she hissed, her voice like a snake slithering through the grass. Here, I am the queen, and you are just a pawn in my game of revenge. Afua knew she had to think fast, or risk becoming trapped in Akua's twisted world forever. She remembered the words of Nana, the elderly woman who had told her the story of Akua's past. Akua, listen to me, Afua said, trying to keep her voice steady. I know what you're trying to do. I know you're trying to punish the village for what happened to Amma. But this isn't the way. Akua's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Afua thought she saw a glimmer of uncertainty. But then, Akua's face hardened again, and she reached out to grab Afua. Afua tried to struggle, but Akua's grip was too strong. She felt herself being pulled deeper into the twisted world, further and further away from reality. As she stumbled through the dark, Afua saw visions of the villagers, their faces twisted in agony. She saw Kofi, the incompetent healer, screaming in terror as Akua's braids wrapped around him like a noose. She saw the village elder, his eyes wide with fear, as Akua's curse consumed him. And she saw the villagers, their bodies twisted and contorted, their faces frozen in perpetual screams. Afua knew she had to break free, or risk becoming trapped in Akua's web of deceit forever. She remembered the words of Nana, the elderly woman who had told her the story of Akua's past. Akua, listen to me, Afua said, trying to keep her voice steady. I know you're not beyond redemption. I know you can break free from this curse. Akua's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Afua thought she saw a glimmer of hope. But then, Akua's face hardened again, and she reached out to grab Afua. You're just like the others, Akua spat. You think you can fix me, but you can't. I'm beyond repair. Afua knew she had to think fast, or risk becoming the next victim of Akua's curse. She remembered the words of Nana, and a plan began to form in her mind. Afua knew that she had to confront Akua head-on if she wanted to break the curse. She took a deep breath and reached out to Akua. Akua, I know you're not beyond redemption, Afua said, her voice firm but gentle. I know you can break free from this curse. Akua's eyes flashed with anger, but Afua stood her ground. She reached out and gently touched Akua's face. Akua, remember who you were before the curse, Afua said. Remember the love you had for Amma, and the joy you felt when you braided her hair. Akua's expression faltered, and for a moment, Afua saw a glimmer of the person Akua once was. And in that moment, Afua knew that she had reached Akua. With a newfound sense of determination, Akua reached out and began to unravel the braids that had held the curse in place. As the braids came undone, the curse began to lift, and the villagers began to stir. The village elder, Kofi, and the others slowly regained their senses, confused but alive. They looked around, taking in the destruction that Akua's curse had wrought. Akua stood amidst the ruins, her eyes downcast in shame. But as she looked up at Afua, a small smile played on her lips. "Thank you," Akua said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for saving me." And with that, Akua's curse was finally broken. The villagers began to rebuild, and Akua, freed from the curse, began to braid once more. But this time, her braids were infused with love, hope, and redemption. The village of Kukurantumi was forever changed, but it was changed for the better. And Afua and Akua became unlikely friends, bound together by their shared experience. As for Akua's braids, they became legendary, sought after by people from all over. But Akua never forgot the lessons she had learned, and she made sure that her braids were always woven with love, care, and a deep respect for the power of redemption.